What? Hello, hello. Yes, this works. um, so, welcome. My name is Fabiano, and here we have André. We're going to present this together because, let's say it's a little bit tricky subject. We bumped into Polymer in the beginning of this year, and actually the name of the presentation came out as a joke, and it became a real thing here. So yeah, let's talk about Polymer then, because I'm gonna start already saying that we didn't have a good experience working with Polymer. Who has worked with Polymer before, tried something like 5%, maybe? So yeah, you can see how already reflecting here the numbers. We're going to show some numbers. And we work for lead-in/go-for, slowly becoming only go-for. And to start with, what is Polymer? So Polymer, it was a library for creating custom elements that, well, they behave like standard DOM elements. They were created by Google in 2015, right? Or I think the 1.0 came out in 2015. Maybe it started around 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And basically, just to mention a few features, or yeah, let's call it features. The elements can be instantiated using constructor, or you can use just document create element. So that's nothing new about that. You can configure using attributes or properties. If you guys have worked already with component-based architecture, also it's nothing new. They populate the internal DOM with the internal DOM inside each instance. So it has a really self-contained DOM. And DOM is a funny thing. It was one of the first funny things I saw about Polymer, that you are used to work with the DOM. And then if you work with React, you might have seen the virtual DOM. And then when you bump into Polymer, you see that there is the real DOM, there is the light DOM, shadow DOM, shady DOM, funky DOM, no, not that one. It becomes a little bit complicated. It's responsive to property and attribute changes, so there's data binding happening there. Styled with internal defaults or externally, so you can expose style to the parent, so the parent will pass variables to style a child component, for example, and responsive to methods that manipulate its internal state. What was that about again?
About exposing child methods.
Oh yeah, it works. It works. Let's say pretty much like jQuery. You call the element, and you just call the child method inside the element. So, and why Polymer? So, as I said in the beginning, this is a very biased presentation based on real-life experiences. So we had this experience starting about in February. We're still working for that. It was a project for a client. We might be able to show some lines of code also. There's going to be some lines of code here. I know you guys have been coding the whole day, but hold on. And what's good that we could notice about Polymer is that it creates really custom reusable components. So there's the webcomponent.org. People create components, share the components there. You just can download, use them, import and use them. And well, they can be easily packed and distributed. That's pretty much related to the first one. And not so good that we could observe is that create deep interactions between components. And actually, this can be a problem in a misuse in component-based architecture. So we saw some components, like we would try to find a bug in a specific component, then when we would see, we would be like in the 80th, 90th level, you know, inside of one component, inside another, inside another, inside another. And that's horrible. It's not so good for creating whole web applications. So I would say that it's more like a component library than an application library. So if you want to create an application, Angular is perfect for that, React is perfect for that. And this is good maybe for very simple stateless components. And Bower is mandatory. So we see that Bower, like people are using more NPM. There's now Yarn for managing packages, and they require you to use Bower. You can install Polymer. Actually, there's something that you can install with NPM in the beginning, but then if you want to install Polymer and all the elements that come along with Polymer, you have to use Bower. So, and Polymer components can be mixed with other libraries. So if you want to use a Polymer component inside an Angular React application, you can do that. But should you? As you already have Angular, you are working with React, why would you mix up? And well, when we came across Polymer in the beginning of the year, we asked ourselves, why Polymer? Why Indeed? And because there was all that buzz around Angular 4, also that Angular would release the CLI and everything. And we thought, okay, Google is putting a lot of effort in Angular, so why are they talking about Polymer? And they were already talking about releasing the version 2 of Polymer. And we checked a little bit the pages that are using Polymer, and it's mainly Google using, like they're using themselves Polymer. And, well, big applications, big companies, they have been using React and Angular all the time. And we decided to get some numbers to compare. And I think this reflects quite well the state. So we got stars force contributors and on GitHub. Then there's the builtwith.com. It tells you how many, what's the percentage of websites built with that tool, or the top 10,000 websites on the web. I don't know what's the criteria for the top 10,000. Issues on GitHub as well, and then threads and Stack Overflow. Well, it's the, let's say, I don't want to say that, but less appreciated, if you think about the stars. On GitHub, last number of forks. Well, there's Vue.js also, that's pretty new, and you can see already that's a bunch of people liking and using. Very small community, 120 contributors compared to 2,000 from React. And here it's AngularJS and Angular together, the numbers. Built with the number here, it's mainly because of AngularJS. And Vue just came out and already passed Polymer. Number of issues, there is plenty of issues in Angular, but I believe that it's pretty much because of these the problems they had launching Angular 2. What else? Threads that could reflect, some people say that the number of threads could reflect the number of issues that you have, but it also reflects the number of, the size of the community. So if you have an issue, you have to go look for something in Stack Overflow, it's much easier to find for those frameworks than it is for Polymer, right? So a little bit of code now. Components declaration, and again, we're talking about Polymer 1 here. We didn't try Polymer 2. Yeah. We don't say that. Sorry. And basically, you declare a DOM module. And first weird thing we notice about that, it's an HTML component. So you import an HTML. It's everything in the HTML. Of course, you can build in separate files and then bundle in the end. But the result is an HTML file. It's an HTML component. And then you have this template declaration with this style inside. And the script is that the way you declare a Polymer component in the script. So there is this kind of a repetition in the ID of the DOM module and also in the script. And also you declare properties just like that. So it's just a huge object that you have all the properties and methods just below each other. And that's okay, it works. So yeah, there's property typing. Even though the project we have working with, they use TypeScript also with Polymer. That's okay. It's that's a good thing actually to have types. And supposed to put everything in the distributable HTML, as I said. About data binding, it offers you the possibility to have one-way and two-way data binding using different notations. So double curly braces, or double curly brackets for two-way binding, and double square braces for the one-way data binding. We learned how to call that a double mustache, the two-way data binding. So nothing special to say about that. You probably, if you work with Angular, you know really well how it works two-way data binding. React, you know also the one-way data binding. And Polymer offers you the possibility to work with both. There is the scope to styling I mentioned. So you can do like this. Let's say you're creating a toolbar, custom toolbar. Then you can expose a variable, let's say the color of the title of your toolbar, and put a default there. And then your parent component, you just define the color that you want your toolbar to be. So host means the self component. All toolbars are supposed to be green unless you have another class there. So those two are green, and those that you have the warning class is going to be red. So you access the style inside the components that way. And now André is going to continue for you.
Little. Well, moving on from that, so every component makes available a bunch of life cycle methods like these. So for every method, you have actually some control on what's happening during its life cycle. So first is the the created function, which is like as soon as the component is created, but it's just like, well, it's basically like when the script is instantiated. Then you have ready when the local, and I emphasize here, local DOM is initialized. So you already have access to the component's own DOM elements, but not within context. So if for some reason your component has to interact with something outside of its own local DOM, then you don't have it yet. That will be the attached function. So, and this is the point that you can get your code to interact with the actual DOM. Then you have the detach function if you want to run some specific stuff when you get rid of that particular instance. And last of all, you have the attribute change. So if you change any properties in your component, you can actually you can use. I mean, if it's a very simple component, this makes a lot of sense that you can just use a single function and then handle the name and type of the attributes that are changing here. But as I'm going to show you soon, there's actually better ways of doing that. Observers are perhaps like the blessing and the curse of what we've seen in Polymer so far. So you can create basically two kinds of observers for properties in Polymer. So for example, we have here like a disabled and a highlight properties. Then we have observers for them. So this implies that disabled changed is an observer of disabled itself, and so on. And then this actually, I mean, behind the curtains, it will handle a bunch of listeners for you, so you can actually have something react to a piece of changing property. However, this can, I mean, there's one interesting thing about this is that Polymer gives you the guarantee that this is going to be handled in a synchronous manner as long as you use the this.set property function. So if you do this, you have the guarantee that all observers that are pending are going to be executed before the next line of code, which is of course very nice. On the other hand, if you as you use these this.set functions like in chain, like we have here. So for example, when you change the disabled property, then you set the highlight property, which will trigger the highlight changed observer. So you can quite often it happens that you fall into an infinite loop or something that is quite hard to track. But still, it's something that's nice to have. Then you have complex observers, so you can declare an observer outside of the scope of the properties themselves, and then you can actually list a bunch of stuff that you would like to observe. So maybe, like I have I have done, I mean, a couple of days ago, like I would have to observe some date and time components on screen, not components, sorry, but properties on that the user might change, so I could do a lot of data handling, and so I would like the same piece of code to observe both, so I could use like an observer to date and time. And then you can do some deeper stuff, like here you have username, user.name.star, so whatever objects you have within the name, whatever properties you have within the name object, then you can observe those. Then you get like a somewhat different observer that you can actually evaluate which path under star is changing, and then you can handle the value like that. So you can do some pretty deep stuff, but as you chain observers together, you can mess up like really easily. So it's something to be mindful of. What else? Oh yeah, I accidentally already covered multiple attributes, so you can have one single observer observing, a bunch of properties at once. You can also have specific observer behaviors for arrays. Then you have to use Polymer's own functions for manipulating the arrays if you want to make sure that the observers will run properly. What else? Computed properties. They're like somewhat like equivalent to the virtual, what would you call, virtual properties on when you're dealing with Mongo, for example, mongoose in that sense. So you can have like this is not a real property that is going to be. It's just a consequence. So this is a property that implies the running of a function. So actually, full name is a function of first and last name, so this will in turn observe that. So every time that first or last name change, you will get a change to this thing. So, and these are read-only, by the way, because of course they can't be otherwise. What else? Then behaviors are another nice feature of Polymer. So you can code like common behaviors for so you can attach them to different kinds of components. So, for example, I can have maybe plenty of UI elements that can be highlighted in a specific situation. So I code a highlight behavior, and then when I declare my new component, I just say, okay, this has highlight behavior. So from this point on, all code will well, for lack of a better word, inherit the highlight behavior into itself. So I mean, this will behave as the highlight behavior and as any other behaviors that you attach to it. Okay, so this is our last slide. So this is more of an opinion-based stuff. As Fabiano said in the beginning, this is a very biased presentation. So while we covered a bunch of technical stuff here, Polymer does like plenty of stuff that other libraries and other frameworks do. Just in a different manner. You have some nice features there, but I wouldn't say that Polymer is inherently bad, but it seems pointless right now. So why you have some pretty big applications, some pretty big stuff running with Polymer, like mostly Google stuff, of course. So like Google Play Music runs with Polymer. Do you have you presented that list at some point?
No, we can show that.
Where was it?
Huh?
Oh,
we can quickly open here and show.
So you have some high-profile stuff running on Polymer, but that's actually quite redundant. So the same work that can be done with Polymer can be done, for example, with React. And when the rest of the world is running React, why the fuck would you use Polymer? Right? So you have some libraries. Sorry, not some libraries. You have a whole bunch of components in web components. .org. But they're not as great as the kind of components that you see available for React and for Angular and so on. And of course, Google doesn't make their own stuff available easily. So So while it's nice to have your own components like behaving like native DOM stuff, that's actually very nice. But it's just, I mean, it's not evolving properly. Just go back to the slides.
Yep.
We can do,
Can't find now.
Yeah, we can do that some other point. Ooh, there we go.
You see, you can't even find that.
So the point is that there are better things out there, and Polymer hasn't been evolving like expected so far. So I don't really see a point. If I would, as it says here, so if we would start a new project right now, would we use Polymer? So it's just not worth the hassle. I mean, it's okay. It does what it does. There is some support, but not much support. If you have like a weird bug, if you need support from the community, you have a hard time finding that. There are not many people doing that. It's just at the wrong end of the evolutionary ladder of web libraries right now. What else? I think we covered it all. Yep, that's pretty much it. So you might have some questions, and we might have some answers. I'm not sure, so let's try this. Is this the only microphone? Yeah?
It would be nice to hear also if
get to answer everything. Thanks.
okay, cool. If you had also some good experiences with that, we would like to hear.
What I'm interested about, I mean, Angular and React are obviously pretty big, but you mentioned Vue already in the presentation. So can you compare Polymer and Vue?
Yeah, not really. I haven't tried Vue. We have one colleague here who have tried. Maybe you can talk later with him. But no, sorry, I haven't tried Vue. Just the numbers.
So I'm just interested in like, you chose Polymer for a project, I guess?
Yeah.
Or just tried, okay. So you've actually done a project now in Polymer. How screwed are you? Like, what's going on?
It was, we got this, we started this project and it was running already for 1 year, about 1 year. So we didn't start from scratch. And they have a, let's say, a peculiar combination using Polymer, and then the template is done in Jade. And then they use some, well, we saw the good side of microservices, but we have some misuse of microservices there as well. So yeah, that's pretty bad. But actually, we have showed the client a small prototype of one part of this application in React. We had some time to do a prototype, and something they took, I don't know, 3-4 months. We did in 2 weeks with React, and yeah, and they are thinking about still doing the version 2.0 now in React. So not that screwed.
Okay, couple of questions. Do you know the history behind Polymer, and have you used Polymer before 1.0?
The history, more or less, it's what I told you in the beginning. I don't have like details, but I think it was 2013 started, and then version 1.
Before version 1, what it was originally supposed to be, since that sheds quite a bit of light on why it's made as it is and what's the point behind it, or actually what it was. Well, it was actually first a polyfill for web components, a kind of standard way built into browsers to create custom components, consisting of custom components, shadow DOM, templates, and what was it? Oh yeah, HTML imports. And those were supposed to come into all browsers, but then different browsers started having troubles. Firefox, for example, still has troubles with shadow DOM, and then it never came. So you can actually see it, I think, still in Polymer in the platform.js, which is the original polyfill that brings all those features to any browser. And everything else was in the beginning just some sprinkling, something to do with those. But the point was being the polyfill. That's where the name comes from. And over time, as the browsers didn't implement everything needed, so they couldn't take the platform JS out, they started adding more and more. And at 1.0, which is when I stopped tracking Polymer, they went full on with the all the other stuff and pretty much gave up on trying to be an implementation for web components and just did their own thing. So that's when they screwed up.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay.
Thanks. We have more facts, more facts.
Yeah, I have started experimenting with Polymer. It was about 0.5, and then it was like some big changes, 0.8, 0.9 before 1.0.
Okay,
Yeah, you remember those. So in the end, of course, most of the developers were on Angular. React not so much because it was quite young at that time.
Yep.
But so they try to do too much. So basically they kind of break away from the original promise that okay, you should be able to add your own, like to extend the browser. Basically this is what a web component is. So they started with that. They went to some extent with that. There was big disagreement with the other browser vendors, yeah, like to, and in the end they had to compete with the features of the other, like the Angular and React. But the story is not that bad because if I might be wrong, but except this Shadow DOM, which might not be like universal agreement on that. Now on the, like, if you take the evergreen browsers, all of them support web components. So if you, I think they do, or are they going to? But Safari.
Active development on HTML imports. Edge is still voting on few things, and Firefox has a bug.
Yeah, but so HTML imports is it was overlapping with what the ES6 imports, so maybe they will consolidate on that. But in the end, so some features or some ideas are still there. They have been implemented by all the browsers. It's just like the community of like. So if you would want to implement something that can be used cross, like in React and in Angular, well, not Polymer, but the technologies under Polymer can be used, and they might be a good way. And there are efforts to do this kind of like fancier video players or something that can go. But yeah, it's like in the end, it's like tussles inside Google there. Like,
yeah, I think just a final message here, or are there more questions? Or
is there still room for one question? I think you have something.
Well, yeah, thanks. Maybe after all this talk, it's not much of a question, but maybe a challenge to you. That can you imagine any maybe post-apocalyptic scenario where you would rather use Polymer other than any other choice?
I would use Polymer instead of Project Query, I guess.
yeah. Well, that's a point.
No, that was all I had.
Yeah, so instead of jQuery. But I think one final message here is that it's good to know, maybe not worth to use thinking that we have really good, really stable frameworks out there. But things like that, for example, if Google invested in that, there's a purpose in that. We had a small story here, but it shows we learn also from failures, we learn from errors, we learn from things that don't work that well as well. So we learned a lot in those months working with Polymer from the mistakes. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And of course, your super cool honorary Web Dev and Sausages hats. Make sure you get a sticker. There you go. Thanks for coming down here, guys. Or up here, I should say. Yeah. Okay. Again, a short little break. 5 minutes or so. our last presentation, and then the big quiz.